The day they told me I wasn't getting the promotion, I stood in front of the glass wall of the conference room and watched them celebrate. Balloons, cake, even a cheesy "Congrats Tyler" banner that drooped on one end like it was embarrassed to be part of the lie. Tyler, the guy who didn't know half of what I did, the guy who I had trained for the past 6 months, the guy who laughed too loud, made lazy jokes, and played 18 holes with our director Rick every other Saturday. I stood there while they clapped for him. Rick gave him a bottle of whiskey and a backslap hard enough to shake the glass. When it was over, Tyler came out holding the bottle like a trophy and said, "No hard feelings, right? They just felt I was a better fit. You get it." His eyes slid away like he knew I did more than just get it. "No hard feelings," I said, but my hands were fists inside my pockets. They said I wasn't ready, not experienced enough, not a culture fit. I had been there 6 years, stayed late, fixed everyone else's screw-ups. I was the one they turned to when something caught fire, but none of that counted, not next to a golf swing and a smile. I didn't quit right away. I waited 2 weeks, finished every task, cleaned up their messes. Then I typed a single-limb resignation email at 2 a.m. and left my keycard on Rick's desk. No farewell, no cake, not even a whisper. I disappeared, but I wasn't done. I moved back to my one-bedroom apartment downtown, ripped the whiteboard off my wall and started mapping out everything I'd learned from that company. Their weaknesses, their blind spots, the industries they neglected, the talent they overlooked, and one by one I started building what they said I wasn't ready for. My own company. I drained my savings and maxed 2 credit cards. I slept 3 hours a night and coded until my eyes bled. I recruited 2 other people who'd been chewed up by the same corporate machine. Lisa, an ops genius who got pushed out when she had a kid. Marcus, a sales savant who didn't fit the look the board wanted. We didn't wear ties. We didn't care about golf. We cared about building something better. We didn't go big at first. We carved out a niche. Automation for small logistics firms. Lean tools, fast deployment, no bloat. Word got around. Clients came. We delivered more. We took risks. And we won. 1 contract became 3, then 10, then 50. 2 years in, we landed a deal with one of the largest warehousing networks in the Midwest. We undercut the old guard, slashed onboarding time, scaled faster than anyone expected. And we weren't just surviving anymore, we were hunting. I saw Rick's company again in a trade journal. They had lost a key logistics client, one we now had. Still, I said nothing. By year 3, we were profitable, we had a growing team, and I had something bigger in mind. I hired a legal team and an acquisition firm. Quietly, through layers of shell companies, we started buying up competitors. Ones that bled talent into Rick's firm. Ones that provided them with support services, software, or data. I watched as they floundered with sudden delays, outages, weird blind spots in their supply chain. I was choking them without them ever seeing the hands. Then I made the move. Their parent company had been looking to offload underperforming divisions. Rick's department was one of them. The numbers were down, morale was worse. They had 2 key accounts on the verge of exiting. My accounts. It was the perfect time. We made the offer through one of our subsidiaries. Low enough to sting, high enough to tempt. They took it. I signed the final papers in a glass boardroom with skyline views. When the ink dried, I was the new owner of the division that once turned me away. Rick didn't even know yet that was coming. 3 weeks later, I walked into the same building I left 3 years earlier. It was exactly the same. Same stale coffee smell, same buzzing lights, same wall of plaques no one read anymore. Only this time, I wasn't wearing a visitor badge. I was the CEO. Rick was called into the conference room on the top floor, the one he never let me set foot in. His face when he saw me sitting at the head of the table wasn't confusion, it was fear, pure and raw. I didn't say anything for a full minute, just watched him squirm. Then I said, "Sit down, Rick, we've got a lot to talk about." He sat like he had weights tied to his shoulders. I looked him in the eye and said, "You remember that promotion you said I wasn't ready for?" He didn't answer. I leaned in. "I'm not here for your apology. I'm here for your resignation." His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "You can't just—" "I already did. You can clear your office by the end of the day. Security will help if you need it." He looked like someone had punched him in the lungs, pale, sweating, stripped bare. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had said I wasn't the right culture fit. Now the culture belonged to me. And this was only the beginning. Rick didn't pack up that day. He didn't even move. He just sat there, stunned. Like he could still wake up and undo the past 3 years. But reality doesn't reverse. It breaks. And for him, it was already broken. I let security walk him out the next morning. Not because he was a threat, but because I wanted every single employee in that office to watch it happen. Quietly, cleanly, no yelling, no begging, just the sound of leather shoes on tile and the weight of pride being dragged behind. After he was gone, I called a staff meeting. All hands, mandatory. Every chair filled, every screen logged in. I stepped up, not to introduce myself. Most of them remembered me. I saw it in their eyes. The realization creeping in like cold water under a locked door. I didn't tell them I was happy to be back. I wasn't. I told them what was coming. "Things are changing," I said. "We're not bloated anymore. We're not slow. We're not protecting dead weight. You work hard, you stay. You coast, you go." Silence. I could feel the fear, the tension, the shift in the air. They'd gotten comfortable under Rick. Late arrivals, long lunches, promotions tied to drinks at the country club, all of that was dead now. I spent the next 2 weeks cutting. Middle managers who sat in meetings all day without producing anything, analysts who spent more time avoiding decisions than making them, HR execs who protected politics and punished dissent. But gone. In their place, I brought in killers. People who had scraped from the bottom like I had. People with fire. Lisa took over operations. Marcus led client strategy. I promoted a junior tech lead who Rick had ignored for years. Her name was Brooke. Sharp as a blade, she cried when I gave her the title, said she thought about quitting last winter, said no one had even learned her name, and made sure everyone knew it now. It didn't take long before the ones who stayed started working different. Quieter, more focused. Not because they were scared, but because they were finally being seen. And the results followed. Our biggest client had been halfway out the door when I took over. They didn't like the way things were managed. Delays, excuses, no accountability. I flew to Chicago and met their VP in person. Didn't bring a pitch deck, just a folder of reports that showed how we'd been the problem and exactly how we were fixing it. They signed a 5-year extension that night. After that word spread fast, our stock rose, the parent company took notice, and for the first time in that building's history, every floor was profitable. Still, I wasn't done. There was one more name I hadn't crossed off. Tyler. He wasn't with the company anymore. After I left, they gave him free rein. Promoted him twice. Let him manage a product launch that flopped so hard we lost $2 million 0 cents and a year of goodwill. He failed upward until the day he crashed through his own ceiling. He quit before they fired him. Last I'd heard he was consulting, small contracts, bouncing around. But I had his email. I waited until everything was solid, 6 months after I took over. Then I sent one message. Subject, let's catch up. He replied the same day. Said he was glad to hear from me. Asked if I had any leads. Said he was open to opportunities. I invited him in for a meeting. He walked through the lobby like he owned the place. Still wore those too tight shirts and the smirk he probably practiced in the mirror. When he saw me behind the desk on the top floor, that smirk twitched. "You're running the show now?" he asked, trying to laugh. I stood. "I own the show." He sat down, slower than he wanted to. I saw it in his hands. The doubt. The scramble. He didn't know whether to pitch himself or beg. "I've been consulting," he said, forcing confidence. "Could bring some valuable insight. Maybe even help out here if—" I held up one finger. "Tyler," I said, "I brought you here for one reason." He straightened in his chair. "I wanted to look you in the eye and thank you." He blinked. "Because if you hadn't taken what wasn't yours, if you hadn't smiled in my face and stabbed me in the back, I might still be fixing your mistakes. But you reminded me who I was." His face paled. I leaned forward. "You taught me that no one gives you power, you take it." Then I stood. "That's all. You can go now." He didn't say anything, just nodded, confused and humiliated. When he walked out, his shoulders sagged. The swagger was gone. He didn't belong in the building anymore, not in my world. I didn't need to destroy him. I already had. Later that week, I stood by the same glass wall where I'd once watched them celebrate without me. Only now it looked different. I didn't see old ghosts. I saw everything I'd taken back. And I wasn't going anywhere. 6 months after I reclaimed what they once said I wasn't ready for, the building ran like a machine. Clean, fast, brutal when it needed to be. But the kind of brutal that delivered results. No excuses. No dead air. Still, under the surface, I knew there were remnants of the old regime. Quiet sabotage. Whispered bitterness. Not everyone had changed with the tide. Some were just pretending, waiting for me to slip. And I don't like pretenders. And I started keeping a list. Not public, just notes, patterns, recurring errors in reports, late approvals that only happened when I wasn't around, vague pushback from 2 of the department heads Rick had shielded for years. I had let them stay, not out of mercy, but because I wanted to see if they'd adapt. They didn't. James ran procurement, liked to act like he was indispensable, always negotiating deals that never came through, but somehow had dinner receipts to show for it. Amanda led marketing, talked a big game, but our campaigns never hit the numbers she promised. She blamed the market, I blamed her. So I did what Rick never did. I investigated. Not by hiring some outsider, I embedded myself. Every morning for a week, I worked out of different parts of the office, sat in on meetings without warning, asked questions, talked to junior staff who hadn't been listened to in years, and the truth came spilling out, slowly at first, then like a broken dam. James had been funneling work to a vendor owned by his cousin. Overbilled, underperformed, no documentation. Amanda? She'd been signing off on inflated digital ad contracts, kickbacks, favors, private lunches she didn't want logged. I didn't call them into my office. I brought the evidence to the next board meeting and laid it out piece by piece. I wanted witnesses. When I was done, I looked each of them in the eye. "You don't belong here anymore." James stood up like he might argue. Amanda looked like she wanted to cry, but neither said a word. They left the building escorted, just like Rick had. I didn't celebrate. I rebuilt. 2 of the junior staff they'd buried under busy work stepped up to lead the transition. One was a quiet guy named Darren who had been designing cleaner workflows in his free time. The other was Ava, a soft-spoken analyst who ran numbers like a machine and spotted fraud patterns I hadn't even caught. I promoted both of them the same week, gave them budgets, autonomy, a single mandate. Do better than the ones before you. They did. The numbers didn't just climb, they exploded. Our margins doubled in a quarter. Our delivery pipeline hit 98% accuracy, clients renewed without blinking. For the first time in years, the staff meetings were filled with pride, not tension. And then something strange happened. I started getting messages from people who had once ignored me. Executives from firms that used to treat me like background noise. Recruiters who had never answered my emails, now begging to reconnect. Even Rick's former boss reached out, asking if I'd consider merging with their remaining assets. I turned them all down. but one email caught my eye. It was from Margaret, the VP of Talent from corporate, the same woman who'd signed off on giving Tyler the job I was denied. She asked for a meeting. Not a social one, a business one. Said she wanted to discuss alignment across the portfolio, which was corporate speak for, "We're afraid of how powerful you've become." I agreed. She flew in 2 days later. Her assistant tried to confirm a lunch reservation. I told them we'd meet in my office instead. She walked in wearing the same confident smile she'd worn the day I was passed over, only now it looked forced, too polished, too rehearsed. "I'll get right to it," she said, sitting without being asked. "We want to elevate you, expand your role across divisions. There's room at the executive table for someone with your vision." I watched her, silent. "You've proven your value," she continued. "Turned around a toxic culture, scaled operations, brought in long-term contracts. It's impressive." I smiled, a slow, cold one. "Margaret," I said, "do you remember what you told me when I didn't get the promotion?" She blinked. "That was a long time ago. You said I wasn't a culture fit." Her lips tightened. "Things change." "No," I said. "People just learn who holds the knife." She looked away. "I'm not interested in your table," I said. "I built my own." She started to speak, but I cut her off. "You don't get to absorb what you once rejected. You don't get to paint my work with your name and call it unity." Her hands folded tighter in her lap. "You came here to offer me power," I said. "But I already have it. You're just here to beg that I don't use it against you." Silence. Then I stood. "This meeting's over." Margaret rose, more slowly than she had sat. There was no handshake, no fake smile, just the sound of her heels fading down the hallway. When she was gone, I stood by the window and looked down at the city. I had come back for revenge, and I'd taken it. But now something deeper had taken root. Not just power, control. I didn't sleep much the night after Margaret left. Not because of anger, I'd buried that a long time ago, but because when silence finally wrapped around me, when the city outside my window flickered with its late-night neon haze, I realized something. Revenge hadn't just changed me, it had consumed me. Everything I'd built, everything I'd earned, it had come from a single wound. A wound named Rick, a wound named Tyler, a room full of people who once clapped for the wrong man while I stood forgotten in the hallway. I had taken that pain and forged it into a blade, and I used it ruthlessly. But now, the edge wasn't just turned outward anymore. I was the most powerful man in the building, and I was alone. No friends, no calls, just a network of respect, rooted in fear or ambition. Maybe both. So I gave myself one final task, one final piece of cleanup. I opened every file we had, from the acquisitions to the internal audits. Every decision, every promotion, every vendor. I wanted to know if I had done better or if I'd just become more efficient at the same game they once played. It took weeks, and what I saw, it didn't all feel clean. We had laid off people who could have been trained, cut contracts without notice, made decisions from spreadsheets instead of faces. We were winning, but not without casualties. That's what power does. It blinds you, unless you keep your hands dirty in the soil, not just the numbers. I brought Lisa and Marcus into the office on a Saturday morning. No agenda, no assistants. Just the three of us sitting around the same cracked whiteboard I had ripped off my apartment wall 3 years ago. "We need to stop acting like we're still proving something," I told them. "We won." Lisa nodded slowly. Marcus leaned forward, listening. "But if all we become is a leaner version of the people who tried to break us, then we lost something more important." They didn't argue. So we changed course. Quietly. We reinstated training budgets. We built real pathways for promotion based on contribution, not charisma. We rewrote the hiring rubric from scratch. And we created a feedback pipeline that couldn't be buried in red tape. Some employees left. said it felt too hands-on now. That was fine. We weren't building a sanctuary for cowards anymore. We were building a fortress of fire, forged by failure, fed by honesty. And then came the final shift. I stepped down as CEO. It wasn't an announcement, just a decision I made one night in the dark, after staring at my reflection too long. I had nothing left to prove. I didn't need the title. I needed the freedom to move without casting shadows. Lisa took the role, earned, not gifted. Marcus stayed on as her right hand. I kept my shares, stayed on the board, but I was done walking into that building every morning chasing a ghost. Instead, I started visiting other offices, not to run them, to listen, to learn, to find people like the old me, invisible, overworked, underestimated, and offer them something more. I showed up to one small startup in Denver and found a kid named Anthony working the help desk, quietly building an AI model on a used laptop under his desk during lunch breaks. I funded his pilot and gave him a team. That pilot grew into a product worth $40 million, 0 cents, in 2 years. I didn't do it for the return. I did it because I remembered what it felt like to be brilliant and ignored. Sometimes I walked by my old building just to watch. No one recognized me anymore. The staff had changed, faces new, but the walls still whispered stories. I'd look up at the top floor window, mine, once, and smile, not out of pride, out of peace. Revenge got me here, but it didn't own me anymore. The world had tried to bury me in smallness, in rejection, in lies dressed as feedback. But I had answered every no with a bigger yes. They denied me the promotion, said I wasn't ready, and so I became their boss's boss. Then I became something else entirely. Free